Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we talk about complex, paranormal, supernatural topics, really delving into the deep end of the pool. And tonight we're talking about the concept that Grandpa is rattling around in the attic and hasn't crossed over yet, and maybe you need a medium or somebody you pay a lot of money to get him out of the attic and into the light. So this is a perfect example of what I call New Age mythology, and the kind of thing that needs to be addressed because once in a while I'll hear people coming up with this stuff, distressed, and wondering, how do I get Grandpa out of the attic? He's supposed to be, quote, crossed over. And people don't, quite innocently, people don't realize how this is quite a patronizing accusation to make to our friends and loved ones who are no longer, I guess we could say, corporeal. Well, before we dive too much deeper into that subject, I will ask you to please hit the subscribe button on this channel if you like these types of subjects. If you're into this type of thing, you might not be, but if you are, then hopefully that this channel will provide conversations and perspectives that you won't hear anywhere else. And I need those subscribes, those likes, those notification bell clicks, those shares to keep this operation going, because it's really difficult getting a channel out there. All right, to continue. So, at some point, a mythology developed where people have confused the after-death contact with the concept that a deceased person is stuck in an environment. And there's a lot of media, ghost stories, horror films that propagate this idea. Now, unfortunately and quite tragically, this idea is then capitalized upon people in the spiritual industry, shall we say. And they may bill somebody $500 to come into a house and help Grandpa go to the light. And it's quite tragic when this happens because it's exploitive, and a medium can say anything they want, and it's very difficult to pinpoint what is accurate and what isn't. So somebody who is really after money could very likely tell somebody that their deceased loved one is, quote, trapped or stuck someplace. But metaphysically speaking, this makes almost no sense. So let's pick this apart a little bit and figure out why it doesn't make any sense. So first of all, we really shouldn't be making this assumption that people who die are fundamentally different from people who are not dead. So what we know from after-death contact, we know from after-death experiences, astral experiences, and just many, many, many areas of evidence in this field that we research on this channel. People who live on that side are very much still themselves, and I can confirm this as well. So there is this idea stuck in our collective psyche that people who die kind of become like ghouls and ghosts and phantasms of rattling chains. So this is embedded into our psyche. So what do ghouls and ghosts and phantasms do? Well, they don't really think for themselves because they've now reverted into this phantasmic form. And as a result, they become this proverbial ghoul, and as something that goes bump in the night, it's not going to behave the same way that you or I do. So they're going to begin acting oddly and doing things which would go against what common, decent, good-natured living folks would do, because they are now of the dead. They are now ghouls. So then it makes sense. This is how people will haunt an environment, because they are rattling around, clinging to their old life. And finally, they just need a medium from the phone book, from some web page, from some Facebook page to come in, and for a bunch of money, help Grandpa finally escape this and then go into the light. And then, as we know, when they go into the light, they're even less likely to still be themselves, because then it's like they become an angel, a fairy, a cherub in a cloud, singing hymns and or serving some deity or whatnot. All conceptualizations that have nothing to do with reality. So the reality is this: people who die typically are no different the moment of death. So their consciousness, the same stuff that's operating your body right now, is still in operation, and so there's no great difference. There could be added consciousness and expansion of consciousness, but it doesn't mean that you are fundamentally different. And generally speaking, a series of things may happen after death. We talk about this channel. We can hear about like near-death experiences. And finally, a person will settle down into what I call the higher density, like the astral plane, which can look and feel very similar to this world with an equivalent body that we go into. This is why people who have after-death contact, this is why mediums, when they report that Uncle Larry is fly fishing, to use my old example, they're not reporting that there's some phantasm floating around a river, using its spectral arms to catch spectral fish. No, it's somebody in a real body, in a real environment, in a real lake, who has a real house, and all of this, because the other side is the astral side anyway. There's other dimensions are different, but that side is still very much a solid, tangible, parallel dimension. That's really what we're talking about, with civilizations and people and societies, and people going to work, believe it or not, clocking in, clocking out, just like here, but different priorities, different abilities, a lot of stuff like that, which is a different subject that we can get into, or I do get into in other videos. You can go back and check those out. Point is that Grandpa dies. He gets met by Grandma or great-grandma or great-grandpa, and readjusts to his new life, and quickly discovers, hey, I can be young again, and I can have the life I want to lead. This is awesome. But then he starts to worry about his family and the people who knew him back on Earth. He wants them to know that he's okay. And then somebody tells him, hey, there's this organization down the street, and they specialize in helping people make contact with people in different dimensions. You should go talk to them. And then they begin training somebody to make contact with this side, and they begin learning how to do things like flicker light switches, and in advanced cases, maybe dialing the old telly, getting some strange anomalous phone calls, maybe feeling a presence, appearing on someone's bedside, like while they're kind of in a sleep paralysis state, communicating to somebody telepathically, whatever it may be. All the after-death contacts that are extremely common. They may pick out things that are symbolic, things that'll get a message across. So they go through all this work, but then once their recipients, once they receive this after-death contact, what happens then? Because of superstition and new agery, they interpret that to mean that Grandpa is physically living in the house and won't leave. And then they go from being happy that they were contacted to being terrified and paying people money to get Grandpa out of the house. Grandpa is left heartbroken, distraught, unhappy, decides to never try to contact anybody again. Grandpa also tells Grandma that, hey, I tried to contact them, and, they have all these superstitious beliefs, and it's useless. Grandma's sad. Everybody on that side is unhappy, and the after-death communications will stop, because no one wants to feel patronized, to believe that they're thumping around as ghosts. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion. So that's the kind of harm that this idea can bring about. So before I wrap this up, though, I want to mention the reality of earthbound spirits. So as an astral projector, I have seen earthbound spirits, and what goes on is that there's this realm that sometimes is called the ethereal realm. And so between this world and like the astral other side, there's an in-between stage where it's just like the film Ghost with Patrick Swayze, where you are halfway in and out So you can walk around, look around, and interact with this plane, but nobody can see you. And it's really hard to make contact, but like in Patrick Swayze's case, with a lot of practice, he was able to like move a penny and do that kind of stuff, which we would think of as like a poltergeist, right? So this ethereal state, unfortunately, does attract psychologically damaged people who are obsessed with voyeurism. And so I've seen this, and I even had a physical altercation once with a person living in this state who was just going around basically being a voyeur, being a pervert. And that's an unsettling thought, isn't it? That this kind of thing happens. But I will say that in all these cases, these people who live on that in-between stage are psychologically damaged. There are people who get off on this kind of stuff. They refuse help. They don't want to go to, quote, the light or, quote, cross over, whatever silly terminology we use. They want to be right where they are, and they end up sometimes getting mixed up with very negative entities that can exist on that side as well. So let me ask something. Was Grandpa psychologically damaged? Was he a pervert? Was he a voyeur? If you answered no to those questions, most likely he's not hanging around the earth plane, so he's not a quote, earthbound soul. I hope that clears this up. If you would like other people to hear this idea, if you want to get this message across, I encourage you to please share the video. I would like more people to understand this concept because it causes a lot of damage. So yeah, especially if you're involved with like new agey groups, spiritual groups. If you hear this misconception, please let people know. Don't spend $1,000 to help Grandpa cross over. This is basically a scam. And consult with mediums who can verify that they are in contact and they're able to provide information that makes sense to your reasonability. Well, that's it for this video. Once again, if you want to get involved, check out afterlifetopics.com. I have books out there like Understanding Life After Death and The Afterlife and Beyond, which is the sequel. Sometimes you can find those at Barnes & Noble. More likely, you can find it on Amazon, and you can find links to afterlifetopics.com. You can support my work by becoming a student. I have access to lots and lots of classes and personal access to me if you want to chat. And that's at afterlifetopics.com/university. That's $30 a month, and we do classes twice a week. Big classes, big discussions, cool stuff. That'll help keep this channel going, keep the big group going, keep the books coming, stuff like that. And yeah, I guess that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys on the next video.